Today we will be making these crochet sleeves, and you will need any yarn of your choice. I'm going to be using yarn Be Simply Flawless. It is a 3-weight, and then you're going to need a much larger hook than the yarn asked for, so I'm going to be using a 7mm. Then you will also need scissors, stitch markers, and also a yarn needle. To get started, you're going to leave a tail long enough to weave in later, and then you're just going to make a slip knot. And we are going to be starting off with foundation double treble. So you're going to want to chain 5. Then you're going to yarn over 3 times. And you are going to make a double treble into that very first chain that you made. It's right here. All right, so to continue and make the foundation treble, double treble, you're going to yarn over 3 times. You're going to go into that same chain space, and then you're going to pull up a loop. And then you're going to yarn over, pull through 1. That's going to count as the chain of the foundation double treble crochet row. And then you're going to just kind of make your double treble like usual. So yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through 2. And again, you're going to yarn over 3 times. This time though, you're going to turn your work over, and you see how these 2 loops, this one's crossing over the other? Well, you're going to go under both of those. It's right there, and then that one, if I can get under all of that. Okay, and then you're going to yarn over and pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1, making that chain again, and then yarn over, pull through 2, through 2, pull through 2, and pull through 2 for a double treble. So basically, foundation double treble crochet is working pretty much the chain row, and then the first foundation, and then the first double treble row as well. So again, we're going to yarn over 3 times, going to turn your work, find those 2 loops, one that crosses over the other, and you're going to go under both of those. Then you're going to yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1, loop. That counts as your chain, and then do your double treble. So pull through 2, pull through 2, pull through 2, and pull through 2. And I'm just going to continue making these until I have the width that I like. I want to make mine to be a long sleeve. The first one I made was short sleeves. So however long you want your sleeves to be is how wide you will make this very first foundation row. So this is my foundation row. As you can see, whenever I pull it up and I stretch it, it definitely goes to each side. If I'm not stretching it, it doesn't quite go that far, but I also plan on blocking it, and just the natural weight of the yarn, whenever it's all crocheted, it'll lengthen out. At least that's what I'm hoping for. To start row 2, you're going to chain 4, and then you're going to turn your work, and you're going to put a double treble into that very first stitch because our chain 4 does not count as a stitch. So we're going to yarn over 3 times, go into that first stitch, and double treble. And then you're going to put a double treble in the next stitch and in the next. And you're just going to keep putting double trebles into each stitch all the way until the end, and I will meet you back here. To finish off row 2, you are just going to put a double treble in that very last stitch, and we are not counting this chain that we made in our very first foundation row. And for row 3, it's just going to be the same as row 2. So you're just going to chain 4, turn your work, double treble into that very first stitch, and then double treble in each stitch all the way down. You're just going to continue repeating row 2 until you have the desired length before you want to start your neckline. I want mine to be right about here, so I stopped after 5 rows. And then you're just going to take your 2 stitch markers and put them, just kind of like hold it up and see about how wide you want your neckline to be. And that's where you're going to put the stitch markers. And then you're just going to count on both sides and make sure that the stitch count is even and that this is completely centered in the middle. And once you get the stitch markers in, you're simply going to do your usual chain 4 at the beginning and then just double treble all the way up until the stitch that the stitch marker is saying. You're going to put a double treble in that one right before, and I will meet you when you've reached your stitch marker. I have officially reached my stitch marker, and for me, from the stitch with the stitch marker in it over here all the way to the one over here, I have 16 stitches in total. And what you're going to do is you're going to kind of divvy that up between treble crochets, double crochets, half double crochets, and single crochets. So I like to have more of the shorter stitches because that's what kind of creates the bottom shape of your neckline. So for me, I'm only going to do a couple treble crochets, 1 double crochet, and then the rest is just going to be half double and single crochet. And basically you're going to do that to the middle point, and then from the middle point you're going to go back up, increasing sizes, and then in this stitch here it'll be a double treble again. So I'm just going to show you what I do. And for you, depending on how many stitches you have and just how you personally want to do it, you'll change how many stitches, how many of each type of stitch that you do. So I'm going to just do a treble crochet in that very first one. And then I'm going to immediately go ahead and replace my stitch marker because I do not want to forget which one this was. Then I'm going to go ahead and do a second treble crochet, and then 1 double crochet. Then I'm going to make 2 half double crochets, and then 6 single crochets, which is going to be 3 for the first half and then another 3 for the second half, basically, of the split of the neckline, if that makes any sense. So just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we're back to half double crochets, so 2 of those, 1 double crochet, and then you should have 1 stitch, and then your last stitch is going to be the one with the stitch marker, and I'm going to put a treble crochet in each of those. And then I'm just going to move that stitch marker up to this last stitch that I did. Again, so I don't forget which one that is. Then you're simply going to double treble into the next stitch and double treble all the way across to the very end. Then you're going to chain 4, come all the way back up to the stitch right before your stitch marker, and I will meet you whenever you reach, whenever you've ended on this stitch. So I've reached my stitch marker again, and this time I'm just going to make a chain of 16. You will be making whatever the number of stitches was in between this. So for me that was 16, so that's what I'm chaining. You'll do, of course, whatever number yours was. So So just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I would recommend making your chains just a little bit on the loose side. You don't want it to be super loose because that would be visible, but just loose enough to where it will be really easy to work back into on the next row. So I had 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And now that I have my 16, I'm going to go into the stitch next to the one with the stitch marker in it, and I'm going to put a double treble in there. Now, I'm just going to put a double treble into each stitch all the way across, and I will meet you whenever you have worked your way back to this chain. All right, I have reached my chain, so I'm simply going to do that repeat that I did for this neckline row. So 2 treble crochet, a double crochet, 2 half double, and then 6 single crochet. And I will be working into the back bumps of the chain because that will leave these V's on the other side and it gives it just a cleaner look. So without further ado, just going to go into that first one, twist it up slightly to go under, and make 1, then 2 trebles, 1 double, 2 half doubles, 6 single crochets, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Then I would do 2 more half doubles. One double, and 2 treble. And now I've made it to the other side, so I'm just going to go into this very first stitch right here after the chains with a double treble. And from there, you're just going to repeat right in pattern. So just double trebles all the way to the end of the row. You'll do your chain 4, come all the way back, and then you'll just be doing double treble crochets all the way across until you have finished the last row before the end. So for me, including this row right here, or let's see. So for me, the rows that aren't in the neckline, I had 5. So I would do 4 of those, and then that's when you'll stop, and then I will show you how to connect both of them together without having to sew anything. You could actually, if you wanted a bit of a deeper scoop, just do more rows of this neckline one. So if I did that, instead of doing 5 of these double treble rows, I would only do 4. Then this one in the middle would actually be one of my neckline rows, and then the next one would be a neckline row, and that would just give me an even deeper scoop. I have done that for other sweaters, but for this one I just wanted just a light little bit of one, and for it to be pretty much all the way up. And then of course, if you did do 2 neckline rows, you would need to make sure to keep moving your stitch markers up, so whenever you come back and work your first treble crochet into the chain, you would need to mark that. I actually have lost it. This is why you would need to mark it. Ah, here it is. Okay, you would need to mark that so that you know where you're starting and ending on the next row and you don't lose your stitches, because it can sometimes be a little bit confusing to try and figure out which one was which, and it's just nicer to use the stitch markers. But for me, since I'm only doing one row, I'm going to take these out and I don't need them. So I'm just going to finish up this row, and then I'm going to do 4 more, and I will meet you when I have 1 row left to my sleeves, and I'll show you how to seam them all together. This would also be a good time to go ahead and try this on and make sure it actually fits over your head. Actually, you could do that after you make the initial chain, because if it doesn't fit over your head, you're definitely going to need to have more stitches in your neckline rows, and widen that out. So I finished all except my very last row. I put it on with the first part that I made in the front. This is the back, and now we're just going to figure out how far up we're going to be seaming our sides. So really what you're just going to do is put it on, adjust it to where you would want it to be whenever you're wearing it, and then you're simply going to look and just kind of see about how wide you want this area in the middle to be, where you'll be kind of putting it on. So kind of think about here or so for me. Let's see. So you can kind of see the stitch markers. That's maybe just a little bit wider on this side by another stitch. So this is looking about where I would want it to be. And then I'm just going to go and count how many stitches before this stitch marker on both sides, and I'll just adjust the stitch markers, you know, to make sure that they are completely even. So I'm gonna go do that, and then I will meet you to show you how to seam up the sides. So I have made sure that my stitch markers are the same amount of stitches from each side. Now I'm just going to get started joining the sleeves. So like usual, you're just going to chain 4 and then turn. And now what's different is we're going to start basically making our last stitch, and then instead of doing the last yarn over pull through 2, we're going to kind of slip stitch it into this side on that panel. Let me get all my stuff up so it doesn't twist on me. We're just going to yarn over 3 times. You're going to go through and you're just going to do your double treble like normal until you have 2 loops left on your hook. So instead of yarning over and pulling through the last 2, what we're going to do is we're going to take the other side of your panel and you're going to go into that very first stitch, which is this one right here. It looks a bit different than all the rest, but that is our first stitch. So you're just going to go in there, get this tail out of the way, and then you're going to do your yarn over, and then you're going to pull through this stitch and the 2 loops on your hook. So you're just going to do that, and you're basically slip stitching them together. Then you're going to yarn over 3 times, and you're going to go into the next stitch as though you're doing double treble, but you're going to stop whenever you have 2 loops left. You're going to go into the next stitch on the back side of your panel, go through there, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then pull through those 2 right there and just slip stitching it together. And you're going to want to make sure you're doing these slip stitches very loosely because you don't want it bunching up your sleeves. You want them to be able to stretch like normal. So if you find that you're going along and it's not as stretchy as you would like it to be, just undo it and then redo those. I had to do that a couple times on my last one. So again, we're going to yarn over 3 times, go in for a double treble, and then stop when we have 2 loops left on the hook. We're going to find the next stitch that we haven't worked into on our back panel, and then you're just going to put that in, pull up a loop, and then you're going to pull, whoop, and then you're going to pull that through these 2 loops, 1, 2, 3. And a trick for keeping it loose is you could, so you can go in here, yarn over, and then just pull through all 3 at one time. I like doing it through that first one and then just kind of tugging up on this before I pull through that to try and make it a larger stitch. Now you could also go up another hook size, so I could go up to 7.5 or an 8mm, and that would probably help as well, but I don't want to go grab another hook, so I'm just going to keep the one that I have and just make sure I do it very, very loosely. There's a regular stitch, over there, pull that up, tug this up, pull through, and you're just basically going to continue this all the way until you reach your stitch marker, and then I will show you what to do once you reach this. So I've officially reached my stitch marker, and now I'm just going to count how many stitches, including this one, I have right up until this stitch. So basically I'm counting from stitch marker to stitch marker. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So I have 30 stitches from stitch marker to stitch marker, and what I'm just going to do is count from this one until I reach 30 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay, so this is my 30th stitch, and basically I'm just going to move the stitch marker from here, which I no longer need, over to this one right here. Basically, this stitch marker right here is just going to be whenever we end doing our regular double trebles, and then we will start joining them together in the stitches after this. So just to show you what to do next, you're simply going to yarn over 3 times, find that next stitch, and you're just going to make a regular double treble, just like normal. And you're going to keep doing that up until you reach your stitch marker, and then you're also going to put a double treble in the stitch with the purple stitch marker. Okay, I put a double treble in that one with the stitch marker, so I'm just going to go ahead and take the stitch marker out, and then now we're going to start seaming up the other sleeve. So you're going to yarn over 3 times, do a double treble up until the last 2 loops on the hook, and then you're going to pull this other panel, and then you're going to go into the stitch next to the one with the stitch marker. So you're going to go into this one right here, and then you're going to do yarn over, pull through, kind of slip stitching, then another one, double treble till there's 2 loops left on the hook, go into the next stitch, pull the loop, slip stitch it, and of course just continue that all the way up until you reach the very end, and I will meet you over there. And you can go ahead and take out this second stitch marker as well, because we don't need that anymore either. And it's snagging. Okay. Alright, so I have reached the end, and I'm just going to chain 2 and cut my yarn, making sure to leave a tail long enough to weave in. And I'm just going to pull that tail through and pull it tight. Okay, and all that's left is for you to weave in your ends. And I personally prefer to keep this slip stitch seam on the outside of my work, although if you want, you could have it with this part being the outside. I just think it looks a little bit nicer this way. So yeah, okay, so I'm just going to go weave in my end, and this is optional, but you can block it if you want. I will definitely be doing that. The sleeves might actually end up being a bit longer than I planned on. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna steam block mine, but of course you can go ahead and wear it as is as well. This is just my personal preference.